Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I do not blame people for bailing from this channel. The booktube aspect of what I do here seems to have fallen to the back burner, largely because reading of books has fallen to the back burner for me. I'm still making progress with this book, chipping away at it. It's companion book. Whoops. I guess that was holding that up. It's companion book. This one, they're about equal in length. Took me, I think, 2 days or 3 days to get through. One could easily make it through in a day. This one, likewise, but it's taking me forever. I've hardly touched my archaeology book. I'm reading something about the Zhao dynasty, the Western portion, the earlier portion. And I've tried, I've here and there read a little Parkman. I've just completely fallen off though, because even though I didn't want to do this, I have fallen into the zone, as I refer to it, when one writes poetry. The hardest part is always the transitioning from life to the sphere of writing. And it's not an easy jump to make. When you've done it a long time, you can do it, but it's not something that one does regularly. It takes a toll, let's say. And so I am popping these poems out like a zit, as I have been known to do. For one thing, simply because that is my way of dealing with uncomfortable situations, such as we all find ourselves in the United States of America. I would imagine in other parts of the world too, people are feeling it because of the huge tumult of the change occurring. We here at the epicenter, I suppose, as the old American way crumbles. I had said I didn't want to write another book, and I am not going to make a book out of this stuff. I'm writing them in this notebook. If I had planned to write a book, I would have started at the beginning and gone all the way through. Things are jumbled all over the place here. Half of the poem here, half over there. That's fairly typical, but there's no sort of sequence in this. So to try to reconstitute this stuff into a book would be really difficult, and I'm not going to do it. I am happy with my last book of sonnets, my second book of sonnets, being my final book. So these loose poems will just sit in the notebook because I really don't care. I think people have already gotten bored with them, except occasionally here and there somebody will leave me a comment and say this really hits it, or this tells it how it is, or something. And that energizes me. That makes me feel that, well, I'm doing the right thing regardless. I've often talked about how Edna St. Vincent Millay was criticized for devoting her poetic talents to the anti-fascist cause. People felt it harmed her writing. As I've said, I don't care. I'm done with the writing. I can produce 1,000 bad poems or mediocre poems between now and the day this regime falls, and it will not trouble me a whit. Some of the early poems, people would come on and a couple of them would say, oh, this is really bad poetry. Ooh. And I think people don't really understand how things work for the poet and having a relationship with the muse. The muse delivers you things to write, and there it stops. Once you have got it to its final form, sometimes you are obliged to fiddle with it here or there, but you are not obliged to make a bad poem given to you by the muse into a good poem. It doesn't even matter. And in fact, it is for the most part best not to even look at things once they have been let go. And that is my general practice. So some of those comments, I am not even sure what they were referring to, the person who made the comment. When this situation ceases, then this mad burst of writing will cease. Something else could cause it to cease as well. But, I mean, it could just peter out on its own. But this is fairly typical. It's the type of writing that is 100% externally driven. It's not something that I put my heart and soul into. I am clocking in and obliging the muse. Having this kind of focus is a good thing when you are writing a long poem. I've shown my couple of big boys on the channel before. It's very good to have this kind of concentration, almost a tunnel vision. But it wreaks havoc with the rest of one's life. So a number of us met for lunch the other day, and I was pretty much worthless. The small chat mode is not available to me very well right now. That would entail me leaving this outer realm and stepping back down into the human world, becoming a human again. It's interesting that all of this guy's books deal with, well, the two that I'm familiar with deal with being human or not being human, and the act of writing does indeed put one outside of that. It is akin to death in many ways. Hence the difficulty of the transitioning. Of course, one has thoughts, and it is hard to know what to do with these thoughts. As yet, we do not seem to have any sort of an effective leadership against this wholesale destruction of the U.S. democracy. And the way of life which we have enjoyed. Many, many aspects of that way of life are changed irredeemably, of course. Politically, it is feasible that the democracy could be gotten back. I don't know how. And so I do think about, well, how would that work? It simply can't work the way it has done in the past. During my lifetime, there has been in the presidency an alternation of Republican with Democrat office holders, and the Republicans come in and they blow the deficit, they tear things down, they wreak havoc, they try to destroy things right and left, and then they are followed by a Democrat who reverses the damage, builds the economy up, makes strivings towards equity and that kind of thing. It's become harder and harder successively for Democrats to do that. A Democrat following this administration probably cannot do it, cannot certainly do it under the order of business as usual. We would need to have some sort of plan. I would say first off, before the Constitution is reestablished, the members of this MAGA cult, particularly its architects and its main protagonists, would need to be dealt with. I'm not suggesting what that should be, but would need to be dealt with in such a way so as to deprive them of any further input into the political scene. For a number of years, at least. 40, 50, something like that. The whole Republican Party would have to be dismantled, I think. I don't think we want a one-party system, but I don't know what could be done. Perhaps some smaller party could be bolstered. And in some way, I don't know how it would even be possible, but a constitutional convention would need to be held. And the problem with that is, again, the lack of leadership across the spectrum would hamper that sort of idea. I don't know how that could even work. I think it would need to be it would need to happen, because I don't think the country can go on with the setup that we have, with the electoral divisions that we have, the electoral college and all of that, all of the gerrymandering done everywhere. The whole system, I think, needs an overhaul, and I don't think that the majority of us Americans are capable of dealing with that kind of conundrum. I mean, obviously the first priority is to remove these people, but people have to be thinking ahead, and it's not something that I should be doing because I am simply a writer of verse. But I would like to see others taking up the baton, I guess, politicians particularly. Some sort of mechanism would have to be in place so that even after this regime was deposed, things didn't somehow just suddenly flip back as they did to a degree under President Andrew Johnson. I'm not a political scientist, so other people need to think about this. I continue to follow three main TikTokers. There's an attorney out in San Francisco who goes by the name of Hawk Podcasts, and then Angela at Park Rose Permaculture, and then there's a woman named Tabitha, and her channel is something like Tabitha Talks Politics. These three I will link in the description box. They are keeping me sane through all of this. But right now, my main focus is, with all of this information, what is there out there that I can use? It's very selfish, but that's how the process operates. It's a very fortunate time for somebody who wants to be a writer of verse. People have said now and again that they have writer's block or they don't have any ideas. It's really something of a false claim because the ideas are everywhere. And right now, the ideas in the air are particularly close-cutting. They are to the bone, as Emily Dickinson said. But this is not really how I would like to be spending my time. I just don't see a way out until this regime falls. I think it was James at Quaint and Curious Volumes said to me, "Don't apologize." I said, "Sorry, something. This is just how my channel is going to be for a while. If I finish this, I will be doing a video of sorts about it, and I'm really hoping to. It's actually a very easy read. It's just nothing is coming easy to me right now, except writing these bad poems. Writing bad poems comes easy to one who has spent a lifetime doing it. Incidentally, the channel of Timothy E.G. Bartell, Knowing Poetry, has a very nice video up today talking about the Longfellow poem Divina Commedia, or Divine I can't remember. I think it's that. It's a set of, I don't know, 6 sonnets, by Longfellow, which he originally used as sort of a placeholder at the beginning of each section of the Divine Comedy when he translated it. So there were 2 in front of hell, 2 in front of purgatory, and 2 in front of paradise. But as a poem, they construct a seamless garment, and it's the best thing he ever did, I think. I first became acquainted with it in my Norton Anthology, 3rd edition, I think, or the 2nd, I'm not sure, that I had when I was very young. And you see it oftentimes eclipsed anymore. People don't include that. They'll put in his single sonnets or some of his more famous shorter poems, but leave that out. It's a sequence of 6 sonnets, but a situation where the sonnet is essentially being used as a stanza. It speaks to the tremendous versatility of the sonnet form, that you can use it as a stanza, but yet what is contained within each segment of 14 lines can stand on its own somewhat, unless there is a line that flows over from one to the other, as I'm sure I have done, sadly. Well, I can put links to all of this in the description box. Anyhow, I just felt like touching bases. I have this book that came in from the library. Somebody on BookTube read it and liked it. And I've looked at it, and this guy, I think I followed him back in the day when I was on Twitter, and I think I liked all of his tweets. But this thing as a book, well, it's not cutting it for me, so I will be returning it to the place whence it came, unread. I really want to get back to reading. That's really where I want my focus to be right now, and I just can't. I mean, it's funny because it's like the opposite of how things seem to go for many people. A lot of people want to be writing. I want to be writing poems or whatever, and as I say, they lack the ideas, or they have writer's block, or something won't let them do it. And for me, after all this time, it's exactly the opposite situation. I recognize that reading is much more important than writing. But it is a special obligation to be in a position to do this sort of stuff. Even if, as I say, it's all as bad as my detractors would have it. I don't think people understand readily that somebody's telling me, well, this is a bad poem, or this is really immature, or this is hateful. It does nothing for me or to me. The kind of thing that a poet always, I think, would like to hear is, this makes me feel such and such. Because that's telling you something about the person and their experience. Generally speaking, when I put a poem out there, it holds no secrets for me. In the old days, somebody would come on and try to correct you, somebody who knew better. Well, you shouldn't use the word fi, like in fee, fi, fo, fum, a perfectly acceptable word. It seems to be that is mostly the qualms people have with poetry. You shouldn't use this word or that word. In his video, Timothy E.G. Bartell mentioned Longfellow's usage of the word, I think it was vociferations, something like that, and said he was showing off. No, he wasn't showing off. He was just using a word. And people don't like it if you use multitudinous. Richard Eberhart did, and Thomas Hardy did. It's of no use to the poet to say, you can't use such and such word. Trying to place that kind of restriction on the muse doesn't work. You need more different words at your beck and call. It is very easy to mismanage them, to be sure. I just wish this would be done with. Because, like, when I wrote my first big poem, The Requiem, at least I knew I was building towards something. In this case, I'm not. It's just scattershot poems of fair to middling quality. You can check out my book, Small Poems, to see what I mean. Some are good, some are not good. That was when I was responding to the Bush administration invasion of Iraq. I mean, at some point there was one poem. I had at the time a dog that was, she was a rescue, and she had not been spayed. The vet, my vet, said, I don't think she would survive the operation. She lived a good while after that, but so we had to deal with her periods. And somehow that made it into one of the poems, and it was like 10 stanzas or something. I mean, just garbage. I mean, just garbage. But there's no real control over any of this stuff. And if one is lucky, here or there, there's a hit. I mean, something hits right, and you hope that maybe this or that poem might speak well enough to be able to speak to some future generations. Of course, I don't foresee any of that, regardless. Not to say there is no utility in this stuff. Poetry does tend to, if not always survive, it has an inherent survivability. So poetry can survive. And so it does possibly provide some fodder for the future historian. Even the worst poem, the Tay Bridge disaster or whatever that people like to mock so well. It still serves a useful function. But it is hard to see where things will be going. Sorry, it's just all idle speculation, but I felt like I wanted to touch base. I won't apologize then for blasting your feed with all of this stuff. If we're lucky, sooner rather than later, the times will change. There she is. Well, when one stirs, everybody has to stir. I'll get on, try to give my book a little bit of a read now. Thank you for stopping by to listen.